Okay, let's see.
Yeah, you can change turns for on my behalf.
Yeah,
Are all the characters blue for you?
yeah, yeah.
The best part about making a multiplayer game is nothing. It's awful. It's just the worst. It makes everything you do in the game 2 or 3 times more difficult for you. I won't go into the complexities of why, but just take my word for it, it sucks. And unfortunately for me, I've been neglecting the multiplayer side of things, mainly because I just didn't want to do it. Not until I had to. And I'm at a point now where I feel like I can't really make any more progress until I get the multiplayer working properly, so, yay. Before I begin, I should mention how I'm testing the multiplayer. Basically, I'm using a tool in Unity that'll create a clone of my game, put it in a new instance of Unity to serve as a second player. So my primary editor is serving as the host client. Host client? Is that right? Sounds right, so whatever. And the second instance of Unity is connecting as the client only, joining through the same IP address as the host. And there were some problems with this, of course. Like, because they're on the same system, they share all the same save data. So all the customizations and the deck I've built would be the same on both games. However, it still does treat them like their own game, so that really shouldn't be a problem. For example, they both have the same deck, but they still draw their own random hands. Technicalities out of the way, it's time to finally start testing this, to see how much of it actually works and how much is completely broken. And spoiler alert, nothing works, everything is broken. And that's my starting point. The first problem I found when starting the game was with the spawning. This is literally the first thing that could have broken, so we're off to a good start. When I try to spawn a character in multiplayer, he just goes up, and then kinda sits there, doing nothing. And I'm not a good programmer, but I'm pretty sure that's not what I meant to have happen. But that was pretty easy to fix, so not too big of a problem. It wasn't long before I found my second problem, which was with the character damage. The character, for some reason, was doing way too much damage. And while this is fun on its own, it doesn't really make for good gameplay. I fixed all the damage calculations, and now the characters should be doing the same amount of damage on both screens. My next task was to check on buffs and debuffs to make sure that they still work with multiplayer. Guess what? That broke too. This is where things went bad, even worse than they already were. Because when I tried to use a buff on a character, it not only didn't work, but it killed him instantly. Doesn't really seem like much of a buff if you ask me. After looking into it for a while, I figured out it was because the character on the client side was defaulting to 0 health points when they spawned in. This means that my whole system for loading in character stats wasn't working at some point, and I had to figure out where. Eventually I figured it all out, and the characters loaded in their stats properly, which means I've officially reached the starting line. Again. And guess what? It doesn't work. The buffs and debuffs aren't properly calculating when used on the client, but after tinkering and moving some code around, I got it to work, I think. And because my heals function in a pretty similar way, I got those to work with relative ease. As for getting my spells to work, that was actually surprisingly easy. I just needed to figure out how to get the projectile to spawn over the network, and I have it set up so that all the stats get passed on through the projectile itself, like the damage it's supposed to do and if it's supposed to carry a debuff or not. So the way I already had this set up worked with multiplayer, fortunately. There's a pretty similar case with the traps in the game too. All I had to do was make sure that the traps spawn in the same place on both players. Then everything after that seemed to work okay. And I think that was the last game mechanic that I needed to fix. But I guess we'll see. I finally have all the core game mechanics working in multiplayer. I hope. However, this still leaves me the biggest problem I have to face so far. I still have to figure out how to get players to be able to join each other from a different device. My first bit of research in this area led me to PlayFab. This seemed like it could be a viable solution, but not for right now. It's entirely a server-based solution, so I would need to use it more for like a random queue system or something. It would probably serve that purpose better. But for now I want to focus on something a little simpler, like friend invites. This led me to Steamworks. Using this and implementing some lines of code, I can allow my game to host a session on Steam and invite somebody from my friends list that's also playing the game. So I set up everything I thought I needed to, and you're not going to believe this, it didn't work right. But even worse, I found that some things weren't working right beyond this, particularly for somebody that was playing the game for the first time and didn't have any save files. Like, they weren't even able to build a deck to play with. So I've got a lot of work to do. Eventually I fixed these smaller bugs and I can attempt Steam hosting again. And believe it or not, there was actually progress this time, without having to go backwards first. My brother and I were able to connect to the same game from our own PCs. Nothing works as it should, and he had sole control over whose turn it was, which seems like kind of an unfair gameplay advantage, but I'm a step closer at least. Against all the odds, all I needed was a small change in the code to fix this, and now I can finally say that the game is playable across 2 devices. And that's all I got for you this time. If you like the video or the look of the game, consider leaving a like or subscribing, because that tells me I should definitely keep going with it. If you have any feedback or ideas, feel free to leave those as well. And lastly, the game's Steam link will be in the description, if you're interested in it. Anyway, bye.